Look. Let me try that again. Wait a minute. That's silly. Okay. Welcome to Novel November month once again. It's November 3rd, and today I'm supposed to be revisiting old pages and cringing proudly. And the cringe is real, but I do have a tool for that. So before we go into today's excerpt, I want to show you my GMC spreadsheet and kind of explain how that works to help me pretend that I'm organized. So GMC stands for goal, motivation, and conflict. And this file is how I attempt, emphasis on attempt, to turn my gazillion wild ideas into a cohesive story plan. It has plot points, character arcs, notes. Good God, the notes. The things that I need to remember from the first story that apply to the second story, and all the intricacies of joining three kind of separate worlds into one cohesive story. And then, and everything is color-coded, because color coding is how I convince myself I'm in control. So the truth is, I built this whole big, beautiful thing, this wonderful roadmap. And then once I start writing, I promptly forget all about it until I need it again. I end up flying by the seat of my pants and writing by instinct, which honestly, I think my subconscious is doing a lot of work in remembering all this pre-planning stuff that I did. But I do rely a lot on instinct and caffeine, and my poor little spreadsheet just sits there in the corner of my computer judging me. But it does help me keep the logic straight, or at least as straight as a story that hops between dimensions can be. It reminds me of what my characters want, why they want it, and what are the obstacles standing in their way, because if I don't remember that, then the plot starts running off like my new puppy trying to get off his leash. And speaking of wayward storylines, today's excerpt is the second in the series I told you about. So I have 4 beginnings to this story. One for each of the storylines, and one from the standpoint of the bad guys, essentially, the bad guys. And I promised you that I would read an excerpt from each one of those beginnings. And then at the end of all that, I'm going to take a poll, and you get to vote on which one you prefer. So in this case, this one is going to introduce us to the realms. This is part of the realm storyline. And so it's about Spana, and she's a charter that helps guide souls between the worlds, between our world, which they call the linear realms, and the realms of the light workers. And what should be a simple process, usually handled by novices, turns into a whole thing. It's the unraveling of a soul's Karma Koil, and this time it just tends to go a little bit sideways, and Spana has to intervene. But while she's busy doing that, we start to wonder who is just who exactly is in that chamber. What soul has arrived in this chamber to have their karma reviewed and tested? So for my readers, this scene is really your first deep dive into the realms, at least the first deep dive into the realms for this book. And it starts to explain how karma and energy and transitions all work in this universe that I am creating. And for writers, it's also a good look at how I tend to blend the whole high concept world building stuff, and kind of bring it down to the whole character level, because honestly, I find stories that are all action and no character to be rather boring. So you're not going to see a whole lot of that from me. Anyway, stick around because once I already told you about the poll, so never mind. So grab your tea, grab your coffee, grab your cosmic staff, and let's get into the realms. Charters don't sleep, they commune. Sometimes it's with the body of light workers as a whole. Sometimes it's just with spirit. But they don't sleep. So when Sunavin shook her shoulder and told her to wake up, Spana returned awareness to her cross-legged form on the floor with a frown. Go away, novice. I'm busy, not sleeping. I know, sorry, Sunavin stuttered, but Master Wallen wants you in the coil room. Spana opened one eye and studied the skinny red-headed novice. She could see a lot, even with one eye closed. Sunavin was wearing the aquamarine tunic of an ancillar. So now, she assumed, he was the Master Charter's assistant. Sunavin smiled. The sleeper we've been watching for months, he started unraveling his coils. Now? Spana jumped to her feet, her clothes shifting from a flowy ruby gown that complemented her dark violet eyes to a more utilitarian gray trousers and queen's blue tunic, the traditional charter garb. Yep. Spana huffed out a breath as she reached for her staff. Whoever heard of a light worker that stutters? She murmured. Why don't you get rid of it? Sunavin smiled again. He was always smiling. Can't say. He held out his arm. Spana crooked hers in his, tapped her staff on the ground, and they traveled to the Karma Koils in a flurry of starlight and sparkles. It was unnecessary and a little dramatic, but her preferred way of getting around. Quirks were the perks of working in the linear realms. Master Wallen, startled by their arrival, shooed away the sparkles as if they might contaminate his work. The things Master Geron let you get by with, he sputtered. Yep, Spana thought, for a darklighter, Geron had been a pretty bright teacher. Unless you counted that whole trying to plunge the earth into an unrelieved misery for eternity thing. But Spana just nodded her head at the new master. She was no novice. She owed Master Wallen respect, not obedience. You, Spana, the master said, come look at this. He waved at a chamber in the middle of the room, about 8 foot square, surrounded by a dozen or so apprentices. Inside, a ghostly cocoon, roughly the shape of a human male, was unraveling. A thick, rope-like coil, punctuated with pulsing light and color, loosened and unwound from the figure it encased. The trailing end of the coil thrashed within the confines of the chamber like a whip. Spana stepped forward, alarmed. Why is no one in there feeding the coil? Wallen shot a glance at Sunavin. Sunavin cleared his throat. I didn't get a chance to. We are waiting for you, Wallen interrupted. You were the best at the coils in 8 generations, were you not? I believe this situation requires the best. It was a challenge. Master Wallen distrusted any charter commissioned by Geron. It was understandable, to a point. No one knew how long Geron had been a darklighter. As a master of the charter school, he could have turned any number of students into darklighters like himself. Since he'd managed to hide his own condition, it was natural to believe he'd taught others to do the same. But Spana resented the suspicion. Every charter Geron commissioned had been subjected to testing by the Grand Council. Every one of them had been returned to full status. Personally, Spana thought Geron was too smart to go fishing in his own pond. Geron had gone dark, not stupid. She gauged the coil. The job required, at a minimum, 2 souls. She looked around the room and her gaze settled on Sunavin. Sunavin had just been raised to novice before Jiran disappeared, before Wallen took over as master and quashed the rise. Sunavin was the most experienced in the room, apart from herself and the master. Spana shook her head. I'd be happy to assist Master Wallen, she said. The coil is significantly unwound, however, and it needs at least 2. I'm aware it needs at least 2, Spana, but I will be observing. Use young Sunavin here. He thinks he's ready to be raised. He's been trained. You helped train him, I believe, in the coils. Definitely a challenge, then, Spana thought. And he's willing to trust the unraveling to a regular and an almost novice. Didn't the master know who was in that chamber? Silly thought. Of course he did. Of course he did. So, not a challenge, but a test. You up for this, novice? Spana asked Sunavin, deliberately using the title she believed he had earned. Apprentice for now, Sunavin said, but yes, I believe I can assist you. His eyes twinkled as he grinned. My teacher was the best unraveler in 8 generations. Yeah, Spana chuckled. Well, remember your lessons then. Guard up. Spana flicked her wrist, and a sky-blue haze took shape around her. Wrist flicking and arm waving were quirks she'd picked up from Jiran. Was it wrong, she thought, to want to remember the things that had been good about him before he turned? Judging by the averted gazes of the apprentices and the new master's raised brow, it didn't put points on her board. Sunavin surrounded himself with the same blue haze and moved toward the chamber. No, Spana touched his arm to stop him. We'll need to expand the chamber, draw the tail where we want it. She gestured to the apprentices on the other side of the room. I'll need you over here, she said, and pointed to an area on her left. All of you, quickly. The coil continued to unravel. If she didn't catch hold of it soon, someone was bound to get sliced. You too, Master Wallen. The master charter moved into place without comment. Spana circled the chamber, eyeing the tail of the coil. Her upper body swayed gently, almost mirroring the undulations of the coil. What do you know about snake charmers, Sunavin? She asked. Just what you taught me. They sway a lot like you're doing, and then at some point they just snatch the snake below the head. Right. It looks like they're gauging when to make the grab, getting in the mind of the snake so they know what it will do. But that's not what's really happening. No. What they're really doing is persuading the snake to move where they want it, when they want it to. Sunavin watched the whip of the coil, Spana's sway. So that's what you're doing, persuading it to go where you want it? Of course not, Spana chided. A Karma Koil is not a snake. Sunavin wiped his brow with the sleeve of his tunic. Light workers didn't sweat, but they did spend a lot of time with the linears. We need to reshape the chamber, Sunavin. Can you do that? Well, sure. What do you need? You'll have to do it slowly so it doesn't startle. The karma wants to wind. It has to coil. Since the host is not currently suitable for that, she nodded towards the etheric shell of the discarnate soul, it'll reach out to the nearest useful soul. She eased gracefully towards the apprentices, still swaying, her eyes never leaving the whip of the coil. She'd suspended her mimicry of linear mannerisms. She didn't blink. Right, said Sunavin. You need to turn the square into a funnel that leads directly towards the apprentices. And when I tell you, let the whole chamber drop. The apprentices exchanged wary glances. If the coil sliced them, well, it wouldn't kill them, but the psychic lash would hurt like hell. Or what hell might have hurt like if linears designed it. They edged back, behind Master Wallen. Don't move, Spana commanded. I'll only get one chance to do this without slicing anyone. Master Wallen threw the apprentices a look with the barest turn of his head. They froze. The violet of Spana's eyes deepened as she attuned to the coil. Now, she breathed. Sunavin reshaped the chamber in his mind, brought it within a meter of Master Wallen and the apprentices. Drop it, Spana said, and then leapt in front of Wallen just as the coil struck out. She grasped the tail like it was the head of a snake and held on. With the dampening effect of the chamber gone, the coil began unraveling more quickly. Ropes of woven karma pulled away from the host. They loosened, strained, impatient to unwind and coil around a new soul. The tail moved faster, whipped sharper, straining to wrap itself around Spana, trying to shake her loose. It lifted her, shook her, slammed her against the wall of the room. Then carefully, suddenly, Spana made herself heavier, and the wild undulations stuttered. Midpoint, midpoint, Spana hollered at Sunavin. But Sunavin was already there. He grabbed the bucking rope with both hands and tugged it against his body, making himself heavy as well. Enough, Spana told him. We don't want it to snap. She regained her feet, mostly, and looked at Sunavin. Working together, they maneuvered the coil toward the wall. Spana touched the tail to the wall, and an opening formed. She pushed the tail into the opening of the war and began to feed the coil. There was just too much uncoiled karma. Sunavin's midpoint anchor just wasn't enough to becalm it. With a crack and a snap, the coil curled and ripped the tail from the wall. It sliced across Spana's face and then stabbed at her chest, seeking anchor in the heart of her soul. Spana screamed. Whew, that was a bit. that was definitely a bit. But this is probably a good idea to tell you that if you are enjoying this, these excerpts that take you into the world of destinies, if you're enjoying exploring that world as I write this second book, then, hey, give us a like. Give me a like. Subscribe. And do tell me down in the comments what you think of Spana and her not so routine assignment in this case. Really looking forward to hearing from you. Again, thank you so much for spending some time with me today. And do remember, fate may choose you, but you choose your destiny. Bye. See you tomorrow.